acting up. I was going to use my computer today, so that's going to be another chore today.
Okay. Hopefully it's not, hopefully it's pretty straightforward. Got lots of people here today. This is wonderful. One thing I'll just say, my husband's a teacher. He is upstairs teaching a French class, so you might be able to hear him in the background. So apologies in advance, but that's the noise if you hear someone else talking. He's conjugating verbs upstairs.
Oh.
Okay, see a couple people are still connecting to the audio. And I'll open up the chat. If anyone prefers to use the chat rather than speak, that's great. And I will keep checking the chat for any questions or comments. I'm just gonna close this door and just lift it open. Oh, and I left the broom in the way. Let's move that.
You cleaned up for us.
Pardon?
I say you were cleaning up for us.
I was. It's proof that I cleaned. So it's not the worst thing to see in the background, I guess, right? All right, got someone else here. Wonderful. This is just great. Okay, let's give everyone a minute to get their audio loaded. That's wonderful. Also, I am going to try to record today's session. So if it works and I post the video, I will crop it so no one's names or faces are showing in the video. If you speak, your voice might be included. So just a heads up if everyone to make sure everyone's okay with that. If you don't feel comfortable with that, please send me a message and I will not post the video. Hello, Yarshini P says, good evening. Good evening to you too. No worries for the delay. Okay, this is wonderful. How many people do we have here? 1, 2, 8. That's wonderful. Okay, so let's get started. Welcome everybody to Pantry cooking classes. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Laura Trabucco, and I am the Community Engagement Librarian at Fort Erie Public Library. Through our current lockdown, I had the idea to do these cooking classes as a way for us all to do something from home that we can do together. The recipes that I've chosen have been based around ingredients that we hopefully already have on hand or ingredients that keep for a really long time. Just because of the current lockdown, we want to limit our trips to the grocery store, and it's something I've done a lot this year. And so I'm really excited to share some of these recipes with everyone and make it a little easier for you to stretch your groceries and clean out your pantry and, like I said, limit your time at the store. So question in the chat, will I mail the recipes? Yes, I will send out the full recipe to your emails. I usually do that at the end of the class. This recipe is fairly short though. I might post it in the chat for anyone who wants to follow it that way, if that works for everybody. Another thing I will say, we're not going to be following that recipe exactly because the spirit of this class is to use up what we have. I usually take this recipe and I adapt it to whatever I have on hand. So I'll post the recipe right now, but you'll notice that, oh, did I do it? Yeah. The recipe that I've posted, the second half, we're not going to be following. We're going to be doing it a little differently. So I'll just give you all a history of this recipe. The other weeks that we've done these classes, I've had a cookbook to recommend as well. I don't have a cookbook that goes with this recipe because this is a family recipe that my mom, oh, someone's here.
That's me, Laura.
Oh, is it you
That's me.
again? You again?
Well, because
on
my
your
computer.
iPad.
Yeah, I'm going on my computer now.
Okay, great. Where was I? So this is a recipe that my mom gave me when I was a university student, and it's one that she actually learned when she herself was a university student. She went on a trip to Quebec as an exchange student to learn French. And the family she stayed with gave her this recipe for quiche. The grandmother lived with the family that my mother lived with, if that makes sense. And it was her recipe. She was a French lady, but she was from Alsace-Lorraine. And she said that this was the authentic way to make quiche in Alsace-Lorraine. So it's I love this recipe because it's very easy, it's very adaptable, and I think it's pretty unique. I've never seen a recipe that makes a crust this way, and it works for me every single time. So I'd love to share it. Okay, I think let's go through our tools and ingredients just quickly. I did send some on the list, but I know I forgot some of the tools off. So I'll just go quickly what I have here in front of me. I've got a cutting board and I've got a knife. I've got a pie plate. I'm using glass, but you could use a metal one, like a foil one, no problem. I've got a pan. I've got a little mixing bowl. And I've got a cheese grater. I think I forgot to tell everyone to grab their cheese grater. So if you have a cheese grater, go grab it now. I also have another piece of equipment that I'm pretty sure I didn't mention in the email, which is I have my kettle here. So we are gonna need a small bit of boiling water for this recipe. So let's go ahead and turn our kettle on now. I have just a little bit of water in here. I'm gonna get that boiling. So if you have a kettle, start boiling your water. And then I'm gonna go through ingredients. I have cheddar cheese. I have an onion. I have just regular lunch meat ham. I have my carton of eggs. And I think in the email I sent, I said a vegetable of your choice. I do love broccoli in this recipe, but what I have on hand today is spinach. I have some old spinach I'm going to use up. So I'm going to do that, and I encourage you to do the same. Please use up whatever vegetables you have on hand to go into this recipe. And then what I don't have in front of me is milk. I'll be right back. So I'm just using regular 2% milk. If you've had a chance to look carefully at the original recipe, it uses canned evaporated milk, but because I never have that on hand, I always just use regular 2%. The other piece of equipment that I forgot to mention is I have a 1/4 measuring cup. And I'm going to use this to make my very easy crust. For the crust over here, I have just regular white flour. I have vegetable oil, and I have salt and pepper. Okay. Anybody need a moment to get their tools or ingredients gathered up? Are we good to go? Okay, I'll take that as we're good to go. That's wonderful. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do to start cooking, like I said, we've already boiled our water. Mine's just boiled now, but no worries if yours isn't yet, because the very first thing we're going to do is turn the oven on. We're going to turn the oven on to 400 degrees. Okay, oven is preheating. Okay, now we're gonna make the crust. So like I said, this crust is very unique. As far as I can tell, I've never seen a crust that's made this way, and I really like how it turns out. It's very, very simple. It's not like a true pastry crust. I think in the email, I called it a shortcut crust, which is the best way I can think of to describe it. To make this shortcut crust, I've got my plain flour, vegetable oil, and salt and pepper. Got my pie crust handy right here. But what I'm going to do first is take a little bowl. And I am going to take my kettle with my boiling water, so hot water, and I'm going to measure a 1/4 cup of boiling water into this little bowl. Okay. And then I forgot to tell everyone you need a spoon, so I'm going to grab a spoon. And now I'm going to try to mix this vegetable oil into the water. It's not going to mix perfectly because oil and water don't mix, but we're going to stir it and get it as close as we can. And sorry, this is actually safflower oil, but I've done this with any kind of oil. I find olive oil tastes a little heavier, but it definitely still works. Like I said, this is a recipe for when you're in a pinch. It's using what you have. I'm going to measure 1/4 cup oil and dump it into my boiling water. If you're following along, you'll see that it's separating. And I'm just going to stir, stir, stir. And it kind of, you can see it separates into little smaller bits. It doesn't need to be perfect. But that's about as mixed as it's going to get. I don't know if we can see, it's got kind of tiny little bubbles. That's what we're looking for. Now, I'm going to take another spoon and I'm going to add flour. I think that the official recipe calls for approximately 1/2 cup, but I've never measured this when I've actually made it. I just add a couple spoonfuls of flour to my oil water mixture. And then I stir until it's combined. And what I want is for it to pull away from the sides and be kind of a cohesive lump, if that makes sense. So I'll show you what mine looks like as I go. So here it has almost, I hope you can see okay, it's got kind of almost an oatmeal consistency. We want it to be just a little bit firmer than that. So I'm going to add maybe 1 more spoonful of flour. And you do want to make sure all that flour is mixed in, otherwise you're going to end up with too much flour. I'm going to add just 1 heaping spoonful. I'm going to stir that in. There we go. Okay, so now it's combined and it's starting to pull away from the sides, which is what we want. It's kind of a cohesive little mass, if you will. So you can see it's like a lump. It's all stuck together. It's not attractive. That's okay. It's not a pretty stage. All right, and now I've got my pie plate. I don't need to grease my pie plate because this is, as you know, mostly oil, so it's not going to stick. So I'm going to just move back so you can see what I'm doing here. I also should have mentioned, we're going to be arranging the crust with our fingers. So if you haven't washed your hands, please wash your hands now because fingers are going to be really in the pie crust. All right, so I'm going to take my little mass and I just plopped it in. Oh, like I said, not the most attractive thing. And it doesn't look anything like a crust. And all we're going to do is gently poke it into place. I know this seems like it might not work, but it will, I promise. I've done it many times. It's also going to rip a little in places. That's okay. Just poke it back into place so that your whole pie plate is mostly covered. So I like to poke up the sides. So that's going to be our crust that goes up the side. It doesn't need to be perfect. It should just be even. If that makes sense. Worst case, if you're finding it's too wet and slippery, you can scrape it back into your bowl and add a little bit more flour. I've certainly done that as well. it will want to keep sliding back down, especially the parts you push up the sides. So just give it a little poke. I also find, if it makes sense, right around the edges tends to be thicker than in the middle. So just move that out. It's very gentle, very, very soft dough. I guess you would call this a dough. If there are any bakers, please feel free to correct me, or you don't consider this a dough. I really like the crust to be craggy, if that makes sense. On the edges, it doesn't need to be a perfectly edged crust. Okay, here we go. So I'm gonna wipe the oil off my hands. And I'll show you, that's what it looks like. So you can see this part, even from me just sliding it, it slid back down towards you. So I'll push that back up. But here you can kind of see what I'm talking about with the kind of craggy crust edge. Yeah, it's really not meant to be picked up. So don't pick yours up because you'll just have to poke it all back. Which is what I'm doing now. Wonderful. Okay, and now we're just going to add salt and pepper, just to taste. If you forget the salt and pepper, it's certainly still edible, but it's very bland without it. This is one of those recipes I've made so many times. I've made every mistake possible, and like I said, I still have faith in it, so that's got to count for something. Okay. My crust is salted and peppered. I'm just going to put that aside while we make our filling. So again, if we have anyone who's looked carefully at the recipe that I posted, the filling it calls for is Swiss cheese, bacon bits, and mushrooms, which is delicious. But as I've said many times, to me, the point of this recipe is using up what we have. So the first thing I'm going to do is slice up an onion. I love onion in my quiche. If you don't, then you can feel free to omit it. So I'm just going to peel the onion. Hopefully I won't cry on camera. So I think this one's going to be okay. Someone told me recently it depends on the age of the onion. The older the onion is, the more likely it is to make you cry, which I thought made sense. And I'm just going to slice this onion in half moons, and then we're going to pop it into the pan to cook before we put it into our crust. I'm actually going to turn my pan on to preheat just because this is a very large pan. It takes a while. Okay, so my first half of my onion is sliced. Like I said, we're looking for half moons, but it can be any way you like your onion. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit of vegetable oil to my pan. Probably too much, but like I said, I'm using a very large pan. I'll move this so you can see what's going on. Just tip that around. I'm going to throw my onion in there to get soft. Cook. That's the other word. Okay. Use a spatula to stir that around. And I'm gonna add a little bit of salt.
Laura?
Yes. Question?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Oh, good. I was wondering, what do I turn the pan on to? Do I turn it on to medium or?
Great question, Katie. I've got mine at medium high, which
Okay,
for me is like the number 7. I don't know if you have numbers on your stove, but
we do, yeah.
yeah, so I'm around 7. So medium.
Okay, thank you.
You are welcome.
Thanks.
Good question. Okay, while the onion is cooking, I'm going to slice up some ham. think in my email I called for lunch meat style ham, but which is I couldn't think of what else to call it, sliced ham. But if you have like any kind of meat works really well. Bacon works great. That's what's in the original recipe. If you had a leftover ham roast, that would work really well as well. I've got four-ish slices here. Sorry, that looks awful. But like I said, totally your preference. And I'm just gonna slice my ham into little squares. So first I'm gonna slice it in long ribbons. Sorry that you can't see me. Go back a little bit. Long strips. And I'm going to take those long strips and I'm just going to slice them into little squares. Everyone following along okay? Does anyone need a moment to catch up?
I'm okay.
You good? Okay, Kate, that's great. Okay, so I have a nice little pile of ham. My onions aren't cooking fast enough, but like I said, that's because my pan is very large. So I'm gonna turn the heat up, but you don't have to if you're using a smaller pan. To start cooking. Eventually, what we're gonna do is put this ham in with the onion to get a little browned, but I want the onion to be a little more cooked first. So we're just gonna set the ham aside. See my little pile of ham. And we're gonna keep preparing our filling. So the next thing to do is grate our cheese. If you have already grated cheese, that's wonderful. You're ahead of the game. I'm just gonna use the large hole on the cheese grater. And I'm going to grate away. You can hear my onions starting to cook. I love that sound. My father used to make pasta sauce on Sundays. And so we would wake up and the house would smell like onions and garlic in a pan. And I think that's one of the best smells in the world. That's what that sound means. That smell's coming, which is wonderful. All right, so I've got cheese grated. The amount of cheese, totally up to you. I usually aim for enough to just sprinkle and cover the bottom of the crust. Okay, onions sizzling away. You just need a little bit longer before I'm going to add in the ham. What I'm going to do now is scramble my eggs. So actually, another thing I forgot to tell you, we're going to need a second bowl. So I'm just going to go grab a mixing bowl. All right, here's my bowl. The original recipe calls for 4 eggs. I've made it with 4 eggs. I've made it with 3 eggs. Today, I think I'm going to use 6 because last time I made it, I thought, well, I'd like this to have more filling. So I'm going to go with 6, but if you only have 4, that works as well. Your filling is just going to be a little thinner. So I am just tapping the egg on the counter. And then once the egg goes in, I use the shell to break the yolk. I find that's easier than mashing it with fork. 4 eggs, I'm gonna do 2 more. Onions are hanging out. All right, 6 eggs. The reason I do more eggs is because I'm not using a full can of milk, so I'll probably end up using less milk than the original recipe. If I think about why it is that I like more eggs than what's originally written down. And the thing that's very strange I noticed recently is I don't own a whisk. I have so many kitchen tools, but for some reason I don't own a whisk. So I just use a fork, and I'm just going to use my fork to scramble up my eggs. Like I said, I've made every mistake possible with this recipe. It's very forgiving. If your eggs aren't well scrambled, they're just going to cook with some whites separated in your quiche, and it still tastes delicious. No problem at all. It's not quite as pretty, is the only thing. Onions, go brown. We'll give them a stir. Okay. My eggs are scrambled. I am going to add salt and pepper. You've added salt to every stage of the recipe, which is really important to build your flavor to any recipe through every stage. Just adding salt at the end is not going to result in as much flavor as if you take the time to add it as you go. And that's something I learned too late in life. Moving my onions around. They're cooking. I'm going to scramble in my salt and pepper. Okay. Now I'm going to add some milk. You can use your 1/4 cup and add, you know, 1/2 cup, 3/4. If you like, I usually just eyeball it, but let's measure today since we're cooking together. I'm going to add 1/2 cup and start with that, and I'm going to whisk that in. Another trick, if you don't want to whisk it, you don't want to beat it with a fork, that I've used in the past, is you can actually put your eggs and milk in a blender and it'll be done. You have to wash a blender, so that's your trade-off if you want to do your work now or later, basically. But there's sometimes where I just want to do it later, and I'm perfectly happy to wash a blender. That is a really great way to get your eggs scrambled. That looks pretty good to me. I don't think I need to add any more. The onions are getting crispy over here, which I don't really want them to brown. I just want them to be soft. So I'm going to put my ham into the pan. Hear that sizzle? The ham we do want to get a little brown. I'm just stirring it up so that the ham is all dispersed across my big pan. One thing I will say, because we're using this lunch meat style ham, you don't necessarily need to cook it first. You could just put it right into the quiche as is, because it is already cooked. I find this adds a little bit more flavor to do it this way. And since I usually put onions in, I'm cooking the onions anyway. I wouldn't put the onions in without cooking them first. The ham would probably be fine. Hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, this is cooking. My ham is getting a little brown, which is, like I said, just gonna build that flavor, make the flavor a little more interesting. And our simple little quiche. Oh, it smells great already. Oh, I left some ham out. That's a little in there. I'll be ready in a minute or two. I'm gonna move some things around so you can see better. Eggs over here. Okay, and you can see my crust has shrunk back down, so I'm just gonna give it a little poke back. I probably could have added a little bit more flour, but it's gonna be fine the way it is. I do want it to be on the edges of the pan because the bits that crust that's poking up the sides is gonna get really crispy and lovely, and that's my favorite part. So I want to make sure we get lots of that in every bite.
Good. All right.
Perfect. Like I said, if you end up with some holes or some little translucent spots in this crust, that is completely okay. The egg filling is going to cook and it's not going to leak through the bottom. It's just going to be egg showing through the bottom. So, okay, my ham and onions look lovely. They're quite golden. The onions got a little browner than I'd like, but they're still going to taste okay. By okay, I mean good. Okay, so let's, oh, I almost forgot my greens. So like I said, I'm using up spinach today. Spinach cooks really quickly and it cooks down. It still shocks me every time how much water comes out of spinach. So I'm just going to throw in all of that spinach. Like I said, I'm using it up because it's not going to be good in the next couple days. So just let that spinach cook down. Turn my can off. Let's not do that. The other thing I find about spinach is it does tend to clump up. So I want to mix really well so that the ham and onion is incorporated. Making a mess and spilling. That's okay. Okay, that's really well incorporated. I'm going to take my cheese and I'm just going to spread it over the bottom of my pie crust. You want to save a little bit extra to put on top. That's always a great idea because it'll get nice and browned. Okay. I don't want to tip this because there we go. The crust will stay intact. So I've got white cheddar cheese, so it might not be the easiest to see, but I've just got cheese over the base. Spinach. So this is going to be a hearty filling today. I've made this other times where I do just the ham and onion, and the filling certainly doesn't take up as much space, obviously, as if you're using a big vegetable. I'm trying to think of other things in the past that I've really loved. Roasted red peppers work really well in this recipe. Just a normal pepper diced up is beautiful as well. I've done brie cheese across the bottom to be fancy. That is like very decadent and wonderful. Bacon works really well. Ham works really well. I've never made it with a different kind of meat, but you could certainly try that if you wanted to try a different meat that you had. Okay, this spinach looks cooked. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to pour it basically on top of my cheese mix, or my cheese and crust. Here we go. Oh, this smells great. Okay. All right, I probably maybe should have stuck to 4 eggs. But we'll see. Now I'm going to take my egg and milk mixture. Okay, so Michelle is saying I didn't have an evaporated can of milk. So Michelle, I don't either. I never ever use evaporated milk for this recipe. I just use my normal 2% milk. That's what I poured into my egg mixture. I will, when I send it out, how about I'll send the original recipe, which is what you've got in the chat, and then I'll also send my modified recipe, which is instead of mandating what filling it is, it's whatever you've got on hand. And instead of evaporated milk, I just use whatever milk I've got. So, okay, so now I've got my regular 2% milk mixed with my eggs, and I'm going to pour that very carefully. I don't want it to overflow. Yeah, I've got a little bit of extra here. That's okay. I've got maybe half an egg's worth. So I'm just going to leave that out because I don't want it to be too full. And then I've got a little bit of cheese that I reserved, and I'm going to sprinkle that on top. Parmesan cheese is really lovely in this recipe as well. If you have Parmesan cheese, I would mix it in to the egg mixture rather than putting it on the crust. Wonderful. Oh my goodness, I am very excited to eat this soon. So my oven's preheated to 400 degrees. I hope all of your ovens have a chance to get there. Because this is quite full, I am going to put my pie plate on top of a baking sheet. I had a really sad incident at Christmas this year. I made tortilla, just like a meat pie, and I made it in the foil pan. And when I lifted the pan out of the oven, it folded in half and I dropped it, and my freshly baked pie just went everywhere. It was really heartbreaking, to be honest. So this is a metal pie plate, so I don't think that's going to happen, but just in case of any spills, or in case you grab your pie plate and it folds in on itself, I'm going to put it on a baking sheet first. Not just a little guy, I don't think. I'm not sure if this is going to fit, but we'll try it. No, that's too small, so I got to get my big baking sheet. 1 moment. Okay, and I'm going to transfer this very carefully because it's very full. And now it's going to go into the oven, 400 degrees. And the recipe calls for 15 minutes. So I always say start with 15 minutes and then check on it after that. So let's just get this in. So if your quiche isn't done after 15 minutes, it will still be very, very jiggly in the middle. And you can always do the toothpick trick, which is put a toothpick into the center. And if it comes out with any like liquid still on it, you're going to need to just add a couple minutes. So I would just keep checking on it every couple minutes after 15 minutes. And while we were cooking, I actually thought of a great cookbook recommendation if you like these kinds of recipes. The only thing is it's propping up my laptop right now. So just give me 1 moment. I'm going to grab it from underneath my laptop. Hopefully this isn't too disruptive. Just there it is. So yes, my fancy laptop stand is just a stack of cookbooks. That works really well. So this is a cookbook from my personal collection, but it's also available at the library. This is called Genius Recipes. If anyone's heard of the website Food 52, this is a cookbook based on a food column that they published on the Food 52 website. And the premise, if you will, of the column is classic recipes that are made with a different kind of technique. which is exactly what we're doing here. So we did not make a traditional crust. We used a totally different technique to save us time and energy and ingredients to make a crust. So they have in this book different techniques for cooking eggs, for making sauces, for classic things like Caesar salad dressing. But they're all recipes that do things in a way that is a little unexpected, if that makes sense. This is a wonderful cookbook. I really love this one. Let's look here. This is a great example. So this is a weird one. This is called onion carbonara. So you actually, instead of pasta, use strips of onion and treat it like you're cooking a pasta carbonara. So this is a really fun, creative book. It's got all kinds of beautiful recipes. There's a beef brisket. Oh, this is a fun one too. This is pasta that's made with caramelized onions and yogurt. So really unexpected ingredients and unexpected techniques to make those ingredients shine. So if you like this kind of different approach that we did today, and you want to try experimenting with other things, I would recommend Genius Recipes by the Food 52. It is available at the library, so you can put it on hold. All right, so we now have about 15 minutes before your quiche is going to be ready. This is the great time to use to clean up and get your kitchen, spick and span and ready to eat. That's not very interesting to watch, so I will sign off, and your quiches will be ready hopefully in 15 to 20 minutes. Before I sign off for cleaning, does anyone have any questions?
Just wanted to thank you again for everything, Laura.
Oh, thanks, Katie. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you all so much for coming.
And have you sent the recipe, Laura, or is it coming?
It will come. I'm gonna, as soon as I get off the video, I will send the recipe. And like I said, I'll send the original recipe and I will send my modified recipe too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What's on the menu for next week?
Next week, we are going to make a bean salad, which is very straightforward, but very easy to adapt into a full meal as well. And the cookbook I'm going to plug is called Yum and Yummer. It's, has anyone heard of Looney Spoons? Does anyone remember the Looney Spoons cookbooks from the 90s?
Looney Spoons, yeah.
Yeah, so Looney Spoons is the, they were a pair of sisters, and the one sister went on to become a dietitian, and, oh, I forget her, one of them's named Janet. I don't remember their names, but the one sister went to school to become a dietitian, and the other sister wrote this wonderful cookbook called Yum and Yummer, and the bean salad we're gonna make is from there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Michelle says in the chat, can we send the recipe book too? Yes, yes, I will recommend, I'll send the title of the recommended book.
Thanks for all the work you put in, Laura. It's great.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm so happy that we have something we can do together, even though we can't be together, but hopefully soon. And our wonderful friends of the library are planning to raise money to buy us mobile kitchen kind of equipment, so that when we are open again, we can start doing cooking classes in person at the library, which I'm so excited about. So thank you to our wonderful friends of the library for that. Okay, so everyone, if you didn't set a timer, which I realized I forgot to set a timer, but I know I put it in at about 1:45. I'm gonna check for my quiche at 11. So reminder, check on your quiche at about 11 o'clock. And if anyone wants to share a picture with me of their finished recipe, or just send me an email to let me know how it tastes, please do. I would love to hear that or see that. Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining. It was lovely to cook together today.
Thank you.
I'll see you all next week. Bye now.